Today, we are so excited to welcome on Dr. Michael Manhart, a PhD, Senior Scientific Consultant with the Couple to Couple League International. After receiving his doctorate in microbiology from the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine, Dr. Manhart embarked on a career in research and development with Procter & Gamble. While there, he held numerous management roles of increasing responsibility in various global healthcare and pharmaceutical organizations. He retired in 2008 as a director of R&D. Michael also served on the CCL board of directors from 2007 to 2009. In July of 2009, he was appointed executive director and led the organization until 2016. He and his wife have served as volunteer CCL teachers for over 35 years. And author of several published studies related to natural family planning, he currently serves as board chair and senior scientific consultant for Couple to Couple League and is a member of the SACS board of directors. He resides in Cincinnati, Ohio, and is the proud father of 4 and grandfather of 11.
Welcome to the NFP Podcast, where we explore the empowering world of natural family planning. I'm Amy Smith. Join me and my co-host Emily Appledorn each week. Together, we're here to dive deep into the science, the stories, and the spirituality behind NFP. Every week, we push back against the free love culture and advocate for a culture of responsible love, where intentionality and respect are at the forefront of family planning. Join us as we discuss everything from the practicalities of charting and fertility awareness to the profound impact NFP can have on relationships and communities. Whether you're new to NFP or a seasoned pro, our podcast is your go-to resource for honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life experiences. So grab a friend, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the NFP Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast. We are so excited to have with us today Mike Manhart, and he's here to share his expertise and knowledge with us from the Couple to Couple League, focusing on the Sympto-Thermal method. So using those biomarkers of our basal body temperature and cervical fluid to monitor our times of fertility and infertility as women so that you can use those biomarkers to help better plan your family. So welcome, Mike. Thanks so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here.
So Mike, why don't you just give our audience a little bit of an overview of your your expertise? What brought you into the world of natural family planning? How long have you been doing it? In what contexts, et cetera?
Okay. Well, my wife and I were married before we knew anything about natural family planning. And it was actually part of my joining the Catholic Church that we tripped up on natural family planning. The priest that was heading up our RCIA program, asked me one day, he says, "What do you guys do about birth control?" And I said, "Well, we're responsible. We use barriers. We don't want to pollute the planet, and we're trying to time our children and everything." He says, "Well, have you ever heard of this document called Humanae Vitae?" No. He says, "Well, the Pope wrote about, family planning and what you should do." And I'm thinking to myself, what does a celibate priest know about contraception? Because I'm a scientist. I've grown up in the drug industry and everything. And my wife's, a chemist by training. She worked in a lab for many, many years. And it's like, what's this all about? So I read Humanae Vitae in bed one night, and I turned to my wife and I said, "Have you ever heard of this thing called natural family planning?" She says, "No." And now she's a cradle Catholic, cradle, grade school, high school, college, the whole bit, So, but what was in Humanae Vitae really shocked me. I read it with a high degree of skepticism, but what was in it was this notion of who we are as man and wife and what we're called to be. And this notion of, there's no higher calling than to help each other get to heaven. And this is the vision of marriage. And here's all the things that could go wrong with artificial means of contraception. It was kind of like, ooh, that's not really a good idea. So I said, well, I guess we better find out about this natural family planning thing. And as it happened that weekend, there was a little blurb in our church bulletin about an NFP class nearby. So we both kind of came into it with a high degree of skepticism. Like, are we going to have to put a pyramid under the mattress or read the stars or, what's this all about? And then they started talking about this reproductive physiology stuff. And I'm looking at that and I'm going, well, I learned all about that in college and graduate school. You mean that happens in my wife? And so we started charting, and we found a Sympto-Thermal method class it was taught by the CCL people. They were the only ones in the area at the time.
And CCL is couple to couple league for those
league.
Who
I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay. That's okay.
So we took the class, and after the first class, I was like, well, we should give this a try, And then my wife started charting. It's like, it really does look like it's working, And in those days, back just after electricity was invented, when we learned NFP, the class was broken into 4 segments. And by the third class, we had this figured out. And we had a 15-month-old child or so. And we said, let's see if it works the other way. And sure enough, we timed our relations, and sure enough, we got pregnant right away.
Wow. That's awesome.
So we thought it was pretty interesting. My wife was pretty excited about it. I was pretty excited about it. So we foolishly volunteered to be, candidate teachers to train others to do this. So we taught our first NFP class with a newborn baby. She was 2 weeks old. It was kind of a race between would we finish our training or would the baby be born. How it worked out. And that baby is now 36 years old. So we've been at this a while as teachers. And
are you still teaching now, Mike?
We still teach, not as actively as we have.
Okay.
But one of the ways couple league teaches is live online courses. So it's very convenient, and thankfully we had done that pre-COVID. So it sort of saved our bacon during COVID when everything was shut down. And for us, it's really nice. We don't have to travel. When it's break time, we go and get a cup of tea in our own kitchen. So it's very pleasant that way. And the students seem to enjoy it as well. So, it's kind of interesting. We used to teach our peers. Then we felt like we're teaching our children, and now it almost feels like we're teaching our grandchildren.
You're not that old, Mike. No.
But the dynamics are interesting. I think in some ways we kind of act as a role model for a lot of couples, because everybody has this dream that they want to be married for a lifetime. Most people feel that they don't even have a clue how they can make that happen. And, Karen and I are still working at it 43 plus years later. So
congratulations.
We are, I think in some ways we're kind of a role model to some of the students that come through, and a testament that it can be done. It is survivable. You don't have to be, a saint to do it. That's for sure. But so we've been involved as volunteer teachers for quite some time. And then in 2005, 2006, CCL was looking for board members who had business experience. And, having worked in the managerial levels at Procter & Gamble, I had a fair amount of business experience as well as being a scientist. So I thought, well, I'll try it and see. And I joined the board for a couple of years. I then retired for the first time from Procter & Gamble after 25 years. And 2 months later, the then executive director called the board together and said he can no longer be executive director. His wife had a rare tongue cancer that had developed. And their 5th child was still, a 4-month-old nursing baby.
Oh, no.
And so he said he would continue to work for the league, but he couldn't lead the league. So I had recently retired. I was living in town where CCL was headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I said, well, I'll go in and write the checks and keep the office open while we look for a candidate. And about 90 days into that, I was having too much fun, and I never thought any candidate was as qualified as I was. So, so in 2008, then I assumed executive director leadership for the league, and I ran the organization till 2016 when I retired a second time. And then I took a couple of, I acted as a technical consultant for the league upon my retirement. And then a couple of years later, I've since rejoined the board. They asked me to come back to the board. So I currently serve on the board. So I'm still pretty much involved there.
So you're going to retire a third time at some point?
Well, I'll probably die before I retire the third time.
Okay. Just keep at it then this time.
Yeah.
That's
as
funny.
long as I can still find resources and money to do research related to NFP, I think I'll keep working as long as I can, or as long as they'll have me. So
what are some of, before we dive into some of these questions, maybe just give our audience an idea of what are some of the more recent, I guess, research projects? I mean, I'm familiar with some of your work, but research projects that you've done in NFP in particular.
Yeah. Well, there was we wrote a systematic review on the efficacy to avoid pregnancy, looking at all the available data that was published from 1980 forward. That was published in 2013, and it showed that all of the methods had at least one study that showed efficacy. There are some numerical differences in the absolute rates, and there are some differences in some of the methods and how these efficacies numbers are created, which is kind of like apples versus oranges, so it gets difficult. But we did do a pretty robust review, and then in 2018, another review by a whole different group was published. Very much overlapping ours, but using a whole different grading scale. We essentially came up with the same kind of rank order, but where we were given A's and B's, they were given C's and D's is the simple way to think about it, just because of the grading scales and all. But the overlap in the high quality studies, the highest quality studies that we identified were the highest quality studies that they identified. So that's been done. We've done some work. I've done a little studies with apps, Natural Cycles app versus CCL's app, which at the time was called CyclePro Go. Now it's Peak Day. It's been reframed and renamed as Peak Day. And we did a comparison of the fertile window definitions with 20 women who were randomly selected who had 12 cycles. So we had 200 plus cycles to look at. And that yielded some very interesting results.
Oh, how interesting.
And then
is that published somewhere?
Pardon?
Is that one published?
That one was published in Contraception. Yeah.
Cool. I'll link to that in the show notes.
Yeah. I forget the date now. It's terrible, isn't it?
No. Normal brain.
But
welcome to my brain.
Yeah, that one and then more recently, I've been doing some work with Richard Faring on the influence of family planning choices on the odds of divorce. And we've used the National Survey of Family Growth, which is a representative sample of American women of reproductive age. So women 15 to 50, that reflects the true American diversity, culturally, economically, et cetera, racially, and everything else. And those studies have consistently shown that women who have ever used a contraceptive method, that like the pill, the condom, had a vasectomy, or their partners had a vasectomy, or they themselves have been tubal sterilized, they have an increased odds of divorce relative to women who have never used any of those things. And women who have ever used natural family planning have a decreased odds of divorce relative to people who never use natural family planning. So there are now a series of actually 4 studies that we've conducted. Richard did the first 2, and Richard and I did the second 2, that show the same kind of general trend. And the most recent study that was published just in 22 or 23 in that really widely read journal called the Journal of Divorce and Remarriage. But we wanted to get the information out to a pretty secular audience. So we went to a secular sounding review. But there we compared the risk of divorce from the family planning choices relative to sort of well-known risk factors for divorce. So couples who get married with a low education, have a low income, or they marry early in their, like in the early 20s or even below versus later, all of those things are kind of well-recognized risk factors for divorce. And what we found was the relative influence of family planning choices was bigger than these sort of well-recognized effects. And so
oh, no way.
We would argue that, we would argue that the way a couple treats their fertility and their relationship when it comes to their fertility probably has a pretty substantial and as yet unrecognized influence on their overall relationship.
Over more so, and what you're saying is more so than their education level and their
Even
age.
more than what we would recognize as traditional risk factors, right?
Right.
It's really kind of interesting.
That's fascinating.
So that's some of the more recent stuff that I've been involved in.
Oh, that's neat, Mike.
And of course, today with technology, with all the apps and the wearable devices to capture things,
right.
We're trying to get some work done using apps and getting
Nice.
some good information on that.
That's great.
But that work is expensive and time consuming.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, thanks for putting that effort, because I know that's definitely wearables, something to just make interpreting these biomarkers and our understanding of them easier, can we just, the idea, right, of the Marquette method, right? Like, can I just pee on a stick and know if I'm fertile or not today? Like, can it be just super simple and accurate would be really great. Yeah. That's awesome, Mike. I'm going to, I'll link to some of those research articles if people are interested in following up and looking at them. So why don't you give us a little bit of a breakdown, if you don't mind, about what CCL is, kind of how it started, and then the main biomarkers that make up the method, right? The understanding of how they would teach couples to track their fertility and use that information to then either achieve or avoid a pregnancy.
Sure. Couple to Couple League was founded in 1971, so well over 50 years ago now. By John and Sheila Kipley, and a physician in Minnesota named Dr. Carnold Prem. He was the head of obstetrics at the University of Minnesota. And he was familiar with the work that Retzer and Doring had done in Europe related to the evolving Sympto-Thermal method, where they tracked both cervical fluid and basal body temperature and used them in a cross-checking way to define the fertile window. So CCL started out as Couple to Couple League specifically because John and Sheila felt that, right out of Humana Vitae, it called for married couples. It said married couples who understand the way to live a married life and understand the natural rhythms will be compelled and called to teach others about it. And so one of the hallmarks of CCL is we teach as couples to couples. Now, we will teach single people, obviously, if they want to. And we've done many engaged couples who have been at opposite ends of the country at times, so you don't have to physically be together. But, from our perspective, your fertility is a shared responsibility and a shared gift. And therefore, it's important that both of you understand what's going on and both of you figure out how you can be team players together. And so like in our household, I was the thermometer guy. So I was up first in the morning. I put the thermometer in my wife's mouth, and I go and I start to get ready for my day. And, 15 minutes later or 10 minutes later, I'd pull it out of her mouth and give her a kiss goodbye and go off to work. And she'd stay in bed as long as she could. She was the night person and I was the morning person. And then at the end of the day, if the temperature hadn't been recorded on the chart, because back in those days, all we had was paper charts. If the temperature hadn't been recorded, I would make sure it was recorded, as well as the other observations that she had made through the day. So CCL has kind of been founded on that principle and has done that consistently for all of its 50 plus years while there. We're probably the largest provider of instruction to couples who are getting married in the church. Many of our couples are taking NFP as a requirement for marriage to get married in a church. That doesn't mean they're excited or interested about it, but they are there and they do have their eyes opened. And actually, we've done some survey data, which I'll be publishing in the future, that shows that they really do get something out of it, and they appreciate it, and they feel that it'll be beneficial, even when they come to class with kind of a chip on their shoulder about, why do I have to do this? So knowledge is power, and this is an area that most people don't understand anything about. For the women, sometimes they're like, yeah, okay, now I understand what's going on better. for the guys, a lot of times it's like, the light bulb gone on here. I understand now why she acts, why I can say the same thing this week and she thinks it's cute. And the next week she wants to bite my head off. So
that is so true. Yeah. Yes.
Aha.
Yes.
So,
Right.
So we find that teaching as couples is really helpful. And of course, we use the Sympto-Thermal method, which has been well tested in Europe in terms of rigorous efficacy trials. And actually, the Sympto-Thermal methods are among the highest scoring when you look at the systematic reviews that have been done. They score the most in terms of quality points and all. They're still up there pretty well. So we follow those clinical studies and the rules that were used in that closely. But I would say that we don't just teach the method in couple to couple league. We talk about how the method is really part of a lifestyle, and the daily decisions that arise as a result of you deciding to use natural family planning, because you have the potential to conceive. And when you have the potential to conceive. And so rather than, saying, well, let's get on the pill for 3 years till we all get our promotions and we get our nice big house, and then we'll think about it. When you're using natural family planning, you're most attracted to your spouse at the times when you're most fertile. It's just the way God made us. And so the question becomes a different kind of dynamic rather than, is this the right time to have a baby? And as I tell all of our students, there's never the right time to have a child. You'll never have enough money. You'll never have enough rest. You'll never have enough time, but it's the single biggest blessing you can bring on to your lives. And so the question, for couples who use NFP really becomes, why not? What would prevent us from having a child now? Do we have a serious reason? It's a very different dynamic. So CCL spends a lot of time in the classes really emphasizing the behavioral aspect of the thing, not just the techniques, because the techniques are simple. You can learn them on YouTube if you need to. And actually, we in the Peak Day app, we have 5 little videos, get started videos that'll teach you the basics of your female cycle, how to track your mucus, how to track your temperature, and how to use the Peak Day app. And in 9 minutes elapsed time, you can probably have the mechanics of the thing figured out. But it's really a lifestyle and a behavioral choice that needs work and practice and reflection and whatnot. And so, so we spend a lot of time in class talking about that. And the couples who are the teachers, they do what we call witness. They talk about how NFP shows up in their life. Okay, so how did they find out about it? How did they decide to have children and why? And how do they handle the hard times? Those kinds of things we talk about openly and frequently. And so, pragmatically, the class is taught today in 3 classes that are about a month apart. And the reason for that is quite simple. Any habit will be established over about a 90-day period. That's why the gyms are always filled on January 2nd, but by Valentine's Day, they're empty because nobody hangs in there for 90 days, right? So we kind of make sure we can accompany the students through that transition period while they're getting started. And that's why we space the classes the way we do. Now, there is an option to learn on your own in a self-paced mode. Where the class has been professionally recorded and broken up into little segments. And you can't go to the next segment till you get the knowledge test finished for the first segment. But, you can march through that at your own pace. And so some couples get through pretty quickly. Some couples take, more than 2-3 months to get through it. It kind of depends on their schedule.
I have a question. I have a question about marriage prep engaged couples. Do they have the option to do the online training, or are they suggested to meet with a couple for their
it kind of depends on the specific diocese. A few dioceses, I know in Covington, Kentucky, which is just across the river here from Cincinnati, they wanted in-person classes, and we had sufficient teaching capacity in the area to cover that. And the bishop felt that that was important. Now the new bishop has come in and been a little more flexible post-COVID, understandably. Other places they recognize, rural diocese with, maybe 120 weddings over half a state in a year, they may have to allow couples to do remote work.
I guess I would, and maybe I should specify, the remote option versus the pre-recorded
Oh,
classes.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of dioceses allow the self-paced option.
Okay. That's
and
what I was wondering.
Only a few limited.
Yeah.
It's less than a handful, I would say, that limited. And the reason for that is the students are not really on their own. When they register for the class, they pick a teacher that's going to follow their charting and answer their questions, and they'll have somebody there. And the teachers get notified when the student signs up. So the teacher will send them a bug note saying, I'm here, here's my contact information, reach out when you're interested. And they get notified when they finish the first class or the second class or the third class. So we do work to ensure some contact there.
That's great. That's great.
Now, it's not perfect. The ideal world would be face-to-face, if possible. But pragmatically, that's just not always conceivable or possible. So the self-paced mode works for a lot of people. And we find, young professionals, he's working nights, she's working days. They don't have, they might have 1 day a month when they're in the same room at the same time, but they're trying to get married. So
it's true. Yeah. It's such a busy time for engaged couples. So it is hard to find time. Yeah,
it is.
Now, Mike, a lot of methods I've seen, well, I guess not a lot of methods, but a few methods I have observed are now rolling out, programs for young people, like youth, way before we're thinking about marriage, during the adolescent years. Is that something that CCL has also taken up?
Actually, CCL has a mother-daughter program.
Okay.
To teach young girls just kind of how to track and predict their next period. And of course, what we find is we're doing as much to educate the mom about her reproductive cycle as we are the daughter. So there is a mother-daughter program there, and we are working.
Is that pre-recorded or is that virtual?
Yeah, that one is a pre-recorded
video. Well, that's actually kind of nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So mom could sign up and do that and sit down at the computer with her daughter and kind of go through it.
And there's 2 or 3 versions depending on the age of the daughter. So your 9 to 12-year-old that's just, starting to develop is going to have a very different set of questions than your 16-year-old. So,
for sure.
So the basics are there, and they're tailored to the age groups. And we're working on the appropriate father-son program as well.
Oh, fabulous.
Because that's an area that kind of gets ignored.
For sure.
But it's absolutely important.
So important.
That's
awesome.
And then I would say we're also branching out to try and reach the non-engaged, non-Catholic audience as well. So we are reframing the class that we teach today in a more secularized framework that'll be called the Peak Day Method class. That's really an outreach to, there's millions and millions of people who are downloading fertility trackers today. And they're getting bad information and they're getting told incorrect information. And so we're going to try and penetrate that area and that space. We know there's a lot of interest out there, but if you see a class and there's a priest with a Catholic collar talking at you in one of the segments, they're going to go, what is this? So we recognize that.
So still, presenting the truth, but trying to do it in a way that's inviting. Somebody.
Same principles that are there,
for sure.
not so
watering it down.
An intent, but just trying to give people a roadmap on a way to live your married life that can really be beneficial for your overall marriage relationship.
Right. That's awesome. Well, I'm going to link to the mother-daughter program. So is all this information on the CCL website?
Yeah. There's if you go to learnnfp.org, That's kind of the one-stop shop for all the different products and services that are available. We also have a program called Natural Plan that we have built. It's, again, a modularized program that's 90 minutes start to finish, and it's intended to be a generic introduction to natural family planning. And so it covers all of the methods. It covers the basic background about why NFP works, the science behind it. And then it has some roundtable discussions with men talking and women talking. And then there's a number of other modules. But that was built really as we surveyed all the dioceses out of the U.S. post-COVID, to understand what's happening. There were many that don't require a full course of NFP, but want a good, solid introduction to NFP that's neutral. It's not method specific. And so people could be, more choiceful and match the method that meets their needs the best. And so we developed this program called Natural Plan. And it's also built in a way that it could be flexible. It could be used in moms groups, women's groups, even an RCIA program. You could take a segment out and talk about it. And it's designed to be tailored that way. So,
gosh, that's awesome, Mike.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Okay. Well, we're going to link to all of this stuff in the show notes. So I'm trying to think where to go from here. How about we, dive a little bit into, you mentioned the Peak Day app. Why don't we just, kind of go a little bit more into that a little bit. So, is there a cost for that? Do you need to work with a teacher to use that? Is there a specific follow-up schedule that you have to follow? Kind of how does that
Yeah, what we've done, the Peak Day app, we've had an app for charting since we had actually a PC-based program for charting way back in 2008 that was turned into an app in 2012, and that was called CyclePro Go. And so it uses the algorithm that we teach in class, the Sympto-Thermal algorithm, to define the fertile window. And then what we have done is invested a significant amount of money, well over $500,000, to repackage the front end. So it's much more user-friendly and much easier to use and much more interactive. And so, but the same algorithm is behind there. So the Peak Day app, it's available Android and iPhone. Everybody gets to use it for free for 60 days, the premium version. And then if they want to continue on with the premium version, it's $60 a year, or I think $9 or $10 a month. I forget what it is, but it's $60 a year is the cheapest way to buy it. Nice. If you want to just use it to track and you don't want it to do all the interpretations for you, it's free forever.
Oh,
you can just start on it.
Okay.
And as I alluded to, we have some what we call quick start videos that, how does it work? How do you take your temperature? What are the basics of the reproductive cycle? We even have a little video in there about what conception is, and how the miracle of conception, when that little sperm and the egg come together and this new life is created. And lots of FAQs are there, lots of opportunities to reach out to a teacher. You can actually schedule consulting time with a NFP coach or teacher right through the app. You can share your cycles. You can share your app outcomes with a teacher if you want. Couples who take the class will get the free 60 days, and then they get a couple of more months for free as well. I think they get 5 or 6 months free total before they have to pay.
That's
just
great.
Because we want to encourage them to do it. So the premium version will interpret the fertile window for you. And so it'll color code your chart, and it'll carry all kinds of statistics. So when you get 12, 15 charts in there, it'll tell you your average cycle length, your range. There's even a display that'll do your most 6 recent cycles that'll show the start, the day of peak mucus, and the end, and the beginning of mucus. So it'll kind of give you a very schematized look at your chart. That was really built for health professionals who are looking at people, what do the patterns look like, right? Because when you look at 5 or 6 cycles, you begin to understand, maybe this is a PCOS case, maybe this is endometriosis, maybe this is low thyroid, something like that. CCL is not a medical organization. We're volunteer teachers. We're lay people. Some of us have more training. We do have a few physicians who teach, but they teach as, volunteers, lay people when they teach CCL. But we do recognize there's a lot of information in the chart that can be valuable to a health professional. So we built Peak Day to be able to display that in a way that's intelligible quickly to a physician who knows what they're looking at. Unfortunately, not a lot of physicians would know what the chart means when they look at it, but that's a different issue. So
right.
But
so the Peak Day app is based on the algorithm that
it uses the Sympto-Thermal algorithm. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is the evidence-based, kind of the underlying evidence to support the effectiveness.
Right. So you need to input your daily basal temperature. You need to input your daily mucus observations. And of course, the app is a little more rigorous than humans in terms of insisting on complete data at critical times. So, we often get a call from somebody that says, the app says I'm not yet infertile, but I believe I am. And we go look at it. Well, it says, well, you missed 2 days of recording mucus in the critical time when the app needs to know these 6 days.
Right.
So, because the app doesn't think. The app just does what it's told by the equations.
Right.
So it is based on Sympto-Thermal method. So you need to input your daily cervical fluid and your basal body temperatures. After you've reached, the end of the fertile window and you're waiting for the next cycle to appear, you don't need to record. Most people don't.
Okay.
Yeah, fascinating study I published on user habits. The students who are taking the class and using the app, they record 98% of cycle days. The teachers who are teaching the classes record at best 70% of cycle days.
Oh, wow.
And the people who use the app with no knowledge record somewhere around 60% of cycle days.
Oh, interesting.
And then over time, the students drift down. They figure out what their cycles and their patterns are, and they drift closer to 70% of cycle days recording their information by 6 months. And those who have never taken a class start low and they get lower. It does appear that, some kind of formal instruction helps based on that information.
Emily and I talk about that a lot.
Now we don't have there isn't any outcome data, efficacy data on unintended pregnancy rates for people who have used an app without a class versus used an app with a class. That would be an interesting question to answer.
For sure.
But a difficult one to answer.
Right. So we've talked a lot about the biomarkers that different NFP methods use when they are coming up with their approach to monitoring fertility. And obviously CCL is the Sympto-Thermal method, and basal body temperature is a big part of that. So could you, for our audience, I guess, talk a little bit more about what basal body temperature is and how that indicates, ovulation, and for what population this method would be ideal for? Would it be ideal for any woman in any season of life, whether it be postpartum, adolescent, just kind of a good indicator of identifying that fertile window, which is for women when maybe they're not looking to achieve or avoid a pregnancy, they're just looking to monitor when they ovulate because they wanted to monitor their health, the role that basal body temperature plays and how we can accurately identify that.
Sure. Well, basal body temperature is the temperature that your body is at the deepest sleep of the evening when you're at rest. So it's basically the temperature that's created by, your respiration and your heart rate and your warm body, your warm-blooded animal nature. Okay. And then as you approach morning, that temperature gradually rises. And so what we encourage people to do is you take your temperature at the same time in the morning, and that's really a half-hour window, not like 7:15, not 7:16. It's like, if it's 7:15, then maybe, 10 to 7 versus 20 to 8, maybe. Okay. But we encourage people to take their temperature at the same time every day to catch it on that upswing. Okay. So your basal body temperature is 98.6. That's your temperature when you're walking around and you're just behaving normally and being a human with ambulatory activity and stuff. Basal body temperature reflects actually progesterone levels that are circulating. The thermoregulatory section of your brain has progesterone receptors. And so when a woman has progesterone in her system, her basal body temperature increases slightly. It's usually about 0.4 of a degree Fahrenheit, 0.2 of a degree centigrade. But it is detectable.
And it's detectable on a specific thermometer, right, Mike? It's not going to be your typical thermometer that you have.
A fever thermometer is usually a little less accurate. You need a thermometer that is called a basal body temperature thermometer. Or many of the wearables today are sensitive enough to begin to check these changes. Okay. Now, the wearables have a little different approach. They try and find the time when you're actually in your deepest sleep, not moving, and quiet. And actually, they're trying to read as close as they can to actually your true basal body temperature, whatever it is. But for fertility tracking, what you're looking for is the difference between the temperatures before ovulation and the temperatures after ovulation. The temperatures after ovulation will be higher, and they will stay higher as long as progesterone is in your system. Progesterone is produced by the corpus luteum, which is the remnant of the egg follicle after ovulation. Okay, that egg follicle makes estrogen at the beginning of the cycle, and then it releases the egg, and then it switches to producing progesterone and continue to do some estrogen, but predominantly progesterone. And so it's a signal that says you have already ovulated, okay, if your temperature goes up and stays up. And then that temperature will remain up as long as the corpus luteum is active, which is generally about 2 weeks. If implantation hasn't taken, if conception and implantation hasn't taken place. And then it wears out, progesterone levels decrease, and your menstrual flow begins because the endometrium can no longer be maintained due to the lowered progesterone as well. So the scientific basis on basal body temperature has been known for a long time, even before the calendar method was created. And those early discoveries in the 1930s, they understood that women who had their rise in body temperature had already ovulated. Some of the old basal body thermometers, the Ovulindex thermometers and stuff, they had printing from the 1930s that talked about using this as a way to find out if you're fertile. It was a basic fertility test before we knew much more in the early days. And then the Europeans, Doring and Retzer, had done a lot of research in this area in the early days to understand what this looks like in normally cycling women, in postpartum women, in perimenopausal women, et cetera, et cetera. And they found a pretty consistent pattern that if you see that shift in temperature, you can be pretty confident that ovulation has taken place. And so that's why the temperature is there. It's kind of a confirmation that's already happened. Now, your temperature can go up because of infections, other reasons, whatnot. So we cross-check with cervical fluid, right? So if you see the buildup of cervical fluid that says you're fertile and approaching the time of ovulation, and then you see the decline in that cervical fluid, consistent with an increase in temperature, you have a high degree of confidence that you've already ovulated, and you'll be infertile until your next cycle when it all starts over again. And so that's kind of how the Sympto-Thermal method works and the science behind it.
Okay, thank you. And so for the woman who is up every 2 hours nursing a new baby, is this not a viable option for her when she's trying to, say, avoid a pregnancy?
Yeah, many women find that if they just get a couple of hours of good sleep, they can still track their temperatures.
By couple, you mean like 2 or 3?
Yeah,
or
2 or 3, or my wife jokes that with our 4 children, she didn't get a full night's sleep for 15 years because there was always somebody interrupting us. And if they weren't in bed nursing with us, they were camping out on the floor because they woke up and they wanted to come into mom and dad's room, but there wasn't room enough in the bed because everybody else was already there. So they slept in the sleeping bag on the floor. So, and, her experience was that temperatures were fine all the time. There are a few women who have difficulty with it, but I would say, my wife and I have taught 2,000 plus couples over years, and CCL teaches 5,000 to 6,000 a year, have done for many, many decades, and it's a small minority of people that have trouble with the basal body temperatures and the interrupted sleep. Now, airline attendants who fly into different time zones, they will find that as they're changing time zones, those crazy shifts that make life difficult anyway will make tracking temperatures hard. And so, people who work for American Airlines on the Japanese Pacific routes from America all the time, they're probably going to have a hard time with that. But again, I think the wearable technologies may be a way for those folks to overcome that issue. I don't know that. I'm only speculating, but those technologies, since they constantly record and they throw out all the temperatures that don't meet the rules to say, no, this really is your quietest temperature, in the deepest sleep of the night. Those may be a way that can overcome that. We'll have to find out with more work, but it's a minimum. It's a very small minority of people who have trouble with it.
I do have a question about the wearables. Are you familiar with a wearable that says that it is accurate in trying to avoid pregnancy? In my experience, the wearables promote trying to achieve, and I have yet to see any of them specifically say this can be used to avoid pregnancy. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, no, there isn't. And the reason for that has to do with the regulatory pathways that are available. The hurdle to be approved to market in the United States as a device is much lower if you can base your observations to say, I'm just as good as a predicate device, one that came before me. So if you say I'm just as good as an oral basal body thermometer at detecting the time of ovulation, then you're free to market. Okay. And so that's why they all focus on marketing. Actually, if you look at most of the fertility trackers, they're all about finding the fertile time, right? They're not about avoiding pregnancy. They're about finding the fertile time. And we use them the other way around, which is quote unquote, not approved, except for, just a couple of that are out there, because the regulatory pathway is much, much easier.
I'm glad you specified. I'm glad you explained that. Thank you so much. Because that makes a lot of sense.
There's actually nothing out there today. Natural Cycles is the only app that's approved as a contraceptive device. It uses a temperature-only algorithm. So that's all you have to interpret is the temperature. Now, it will have an unintended pregnancy rate of 8 to 9%. And the study that I published with some other folks, where we compared, from the same 200 plus cycles in the same women, the Cycle Pro Go Sympto-Thermal algorithm versus Natural Cycles, 13% of those cycles from Natural Cycles said you were infertile at a time before the woman had reached peak mucus. So the app was telling them in 13% of the cases that they were no longer fertile, when in fact it was probably one of their most fertile days of the cycle.
Wow, that is fascinating.
And so,
and once again, it just goes to show trying to educate yourself about your fertility without some sort of formal instruction, that can be really challenging, I would think, for lots of couples. The instruction from a teacher is so helpful to know what you're looking for.
Yeah, and they have the benefit of the perspective, right? I mean, as teachers, you have some sense of what the science says. You may not be, completely accurate or completely up to date, but at least you have some sense of it. It's wisdom. that comes. So it's helpful in that respect.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for going over that. I think that makes the Sympto-Thermal method a little more, just friendly to different women in different seasons of life. So they don't have to feel like, well, I don't sleep 8 hours straight, so there's no way I can check my basal body temperature. So that's good to know.
Yeah, I think some of that stuff has been a little mythology that's been promoted through the
Right.
years.
And
But I would
just
say, as a Sympto-Thermal teacher, I would say it's not the best method for everybody.
right.
Okay. And I would, it sounds corny, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but the method that works for you is the best method for you. If you
For
can
sure.
stick with it, if
Yep.
it meets your needs, if you're willing to live with the vagaries that are included in every method,
Right.
then you're there.
Right.
Some people look at the Sympto-Thermal method and said that's too much.
Right.
It's too many things I have to remember to record on a
Right.
daily basis. It's
Right.
just too much. And, we want to have kids anyway.
Right.
So, if they come a little earlier than we think, that might not be too big enough. Other people are like, I'm recovering from cancer. I don't dare get pregnant.
Right.
I need to be careful. Well, then you
Right.
need something that you have an incredible high degree of confidence in.
Right.
And you're probably willing to do a lot more
Right.
to meet that need. So there's a balancing act, and there's a spectrum there
Right.
across the way.
That's a great segue actually into my next point, which was, or my next question for you is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, I think there's some more recent research looking at the couple's level of motivation as it relates to the effectiveness of different NFP methods, and how, not every user of NFP, when we look at whether or not a pregnancy was achieved and it was intended or unintended, well, the follow-up question to that was, well, what was the level of motivation of the user, right? Because to your point, kind of what you just said is that, well, we could be like, we're trying to, quote unquote, I'm saying air quotes here, like I'm avoiding a pregnancy, but my motivation level is like, but if we get pregnant, not that big of a deal. And if I miss a couple observations, whatever, versus the couple our goal is to avoid, you mentioned like a cancer patient, maybe, going through treatment. I am checking my temperature. I am on top of my cervical mucus observations, and the outcome, right, the unintended pregnancy rate might look different for those two users, but be lumped into one when we're assessing the effectiveness of that one method. So anyway, I'd love to hear, since you have so many years of experience, how, motivation, the role of motivation of the user plays into the effectiveness of the method, whether they're trying to avoid or achieve.
Yeah, no, it plays an extremely large role, and it's actually the motivation of both the husband and the wife. Because I think Joe Stanford in some of his work has shown that when the mismatch is there between the man and the woman, the chances for unintended pregnancy are pretty high. And then Richard Faring has shown with the Marquette work that those who had a high motivation, on a 10-point scale, like 9 and above, those couples who had a high motivation to avoid, they had, incredibly high effectiveness rates, whereas those with lower motivation had lower and lower rates. So it makes sense. Which again, I think goes back to why CCL really emphasizes that this is a couple. It's a couple game, right? You don't share you share. It's a shared gift and a shared responsibility. It's a team sport. And you need to talk to each other about it. You need to have the conversation. And it's okay, to say, well, I'd really like to make love now, but I'm not sure that's the right decision. And to talk about that as a couple is far more effective than to kind of pull into yourself and, deal with it yourself and try and just tough it out. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So there is some research that does say motivation plays a difference. I would also say there's been a fair amount of work that was done overseas with cycle beads and some of the standard days methods and the 2-day method, which are taught in largely rural, uneducated, illiterate populations and stuff. And
Underdeveloped countries, is that correct?
Undeveloped countries. And they would say that, when the man was involved with the woman, the outcomes were always better than if just the woman was being taught. Now, some of that is cultural for obvious reasons, but again, I think it's the notion that neither of you can become pregnant on your own. It does take two of you. So you need to talk about it. You need to be engaged and active together. And that can take varying forms in different couples, but it needs to happen. So motivation does play a huge role. And as you say, the definition of unintended pregnancies is so broad. And, it ranges from the one end about, well, we wanted to get pregnant at Christmas, but it happened on Labor Day, right? To, I don't want this baby and I'm having an abortion, right? It's that kind of a range, which is really, really broad.
Right.
And quite frankly, from a research standpoint, that's a monster gorilla that you've got to try and sort through, which is not an easy one to do.
Right. I often think of, you talked about when is it Joe Stanford, when you looked at couples and how within couple, if a husband and wife are on different pages with their level of motivation and their goals to achieve or avoid, how that impacts, the effectiveness. I feel like that, I think that just speaks to the burden or I don't know what I'm trying to say here. The method is blamed for the outcome, or NFP is blamed for the outcome, where I would say, no, this is not an NFP method. This is not a your biology method or your fertility issue. This is a marital issue. You guys are not on the same page here. You need to communicate. We need to maybe talk about counseling or couples counseling, getting you guys together, working on that relationship aspect, which it sounds like Couple to Couple League really emphasizes in their approach to natural family planning is, getting the couple to talk, to be on the same page, to recognize that they're partners in their goals to achieve or avoid a pregnancy and in their monitoring of their fertility.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. It's important. For the guy to say, well, just tell me when it's okay. That's really not participating, right? And what does that show about your respect for your partner?
Right.
If we're going to treat humans with the dignity that they deserve, we should be willing to engage a little bit more. 40 years of marriage has taught me that it's really not about me. It's about her first. And when we each come at it that way, it makes a difference.
For sure.
And so it's getting over our selfishness, our self-centeredness, and our own narcissistic tendencies almost. To recognize that it's a much bigger thing that we've got to deal with here.
Right.
But the beauty of NFP is it gives you a way to practice it in small bits. Learning to abstain for a few days in a regular cycle when life is normal makes life a lot easier when suddenly, you're 3,000 miles apart because of a deployment, or you've got a medical issue that says, oh no, I can barely go to the bathroom. We can't have relations, for the next month. And so it's a little bit like Rasputin, taking his arsenic to prevent from getting assassinated in the Russian oligarchy. A little bit of practice along the way really sets you up for those times when it's really important.
That touches on. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that we often talk about that with our couples. That we had many times in our lives when, for medical reasons, or we lived overseas for a while, and so Karen and the kids, when school was out, they'd come back to the States for most of the summer, and I'd be on the bachelor plan. We had extended periods of abstinence, obviously, because we were 3,500 miles apart from each other. But it was more manageable because we had learned how to deal with it when we were together, and life was not so stressful.
Yes.
And in a lot of ways, those are the kinds of things that I think give reasons for people who have ever used NFP to have a lower risk of divorce. They're training like Olympic athletes to keep their marriage intact and to keep it strong, and they do it every day. Right? Not too many gold medalists take Saturdays and Sundays off in the 4 years before the Olympics, right? They work every day, and they work hard. And so why shouldn't we do that to the most important relationship in our life, which is our marriage?
Yeah, what a great point to end on, Mike. Yeah, I think that's, one of the reasons Emily and I are both pretty passionate about getting this message out to young adults, and then just the knowledge of your body and how, we are made in God's image, and how the bodies work, and how male and female are complementary to each other, to even younger populations, to teach boys and girls about here's how our bodies work together to bring about life, and the beauty in that, because I think when that cliche saying, knowledge is power, but knowledge it's life-changing, it's eye-opening, it gives you a greater appreciation for yourself and for somebody else, so that you can grow in that, that respect for human dignity, and grow in your vocation to love, right? That's what we're ultimately all called to do. And as we've said many times on this podcast, that not having sex will not kill you. It is not like, not having air or not having food or water. You can go without. And then the times when you come together again as couples, it makes it even more special. So, yeah. And Emily, do you have any other questions you wanted to ask Mike?
No, I thought that was great. I just, wrapping it up with those specific points, because it really does. There's so much fruit that comes from the discipline of, practicing a natural method. It's really beautiful.
Right. Hard, but worth it, right? Take up our cross and follow after Christ.
Right.
Yeah, Mike, this is so great. I didn't know half of the things you mentioned that CCL offers. It's just amazing. I'm going to try to look up all this, and I'll link it all in the show notes for everybody. Is there anything else you'd like to maybe leave our audience? Any, resources or words of wisdom? I mean, you've given us so much already. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I think the Learn NFP website is a good place to go if you're looking for things. There is the CCL website as well. If you're engaged and getting married and you need to take an NFP class, that's probably an easy place to go. Peakday.com, of course, is the website for the app. I would say the other thing about Peak Day, there's no advertising. We don't sell your data. It is, it's internally held. The release does say that when you use the app, you agree to allow your data to be used in a de-identified way in large scale numbers, so we can get an understanding of cycle patterns and do research and stuff. But all of that stuff is completely disconnected from any kind of personal identifiers. And there's no advertising. The apps that are all free out there that you can use for free, they're selling your data to advertisers and marketers. There is no free lunch in this world. We all know that. But we always continually think there is. So that's one of the reasons that there's a subscription fee for the Peak Day app, because it does cost, every time Apple does an update, there's a tweak that's got to get done in the algorithms that work on an Apple platform. And so it's not free to keep it up. And therefore we have to charge a little bit of money at least to keep things going. But that's
and
the
CCL is a nonprofit, right?
We are a nonprofit organization, right?
So people can donate on your website as well.
People can donate. And actually about half of our total revenue is from donations.
That's awesome.
And the other half comes from course fees and instruction. But of course, the actual cost for the course, that's what the student pays, is about a half to a third of what it really costs per student to generate the class and everything, and to maintain and train the teachers and everything else. So, it's a nonprofit.
Okay.
So we're always struggling like everybody else.
So if you're writing your tithe checks each month, think of CCL, and if you feel so inclined, give to them as well. So
we'd be always grateful, and we are very judicious and careful stewards of those who have given us funding to continue to try and build marriage to be the way God planned it to be, not the way man thinks it should be. So,
right. Thank you so much, Mike, for your time and for your wisdom and expertise. This has been so better than I thought it was going to be. So much great information for people. I know everyone's going to find it really, really helpful. And there will be a ton of information in the show notes. I'm going to try to link to almost everything Mike offered us today. So yeah, if you don't have any other questions, Emily, then I think we'll just.
Okay, good. Do you want me to send you any of the papers that we talked about?
Sure. Yeah. If you want to, I was going to look them up, but yeah, if you can send me direct links, that'd be a lot easier.
Well, because you don't have my CV's got them in there, but I don't think I sent that to you. So
no, I just got your brief bio. So yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's more than enough garbage about me.
So. No, definitely not. You're awesome, Mike. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you in another episode of the NFP podcast. Reach out with any questions you have, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That wraps up another episode of the NFP podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Please connect with us by sending us an email with your questions and stories to thenfpshow@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with more insights, tips, and heartfelt conversations about natural family planning. Until then, love responsibly.